In Alan Fisher, he's live for us in Washington, D.C. So, first of all, just explain to us why Biden is removing Cuba from this list of state sponsors of terrorism now.
Well, this is something that's been under examination since essentially the Biden administration took over in the White House. Donald Trump changed the designation as he was going out the door, in fact, on the 12th of January 2021. And the Biden administration criticised them for it, saying that essentially they were tying their hands for a while. Now, they said they would undergo a review. They've done that. In 2022, Antony Blinken said that was still underway. And here we are, almost 3 years later, and they said that's now done and they're removing the designation. So what does it mean? It means that Cuba is removed from the list that also includes North Korea, Syria and Iran. It means that humanitarian organisations, church groups and various human rights organisations can now move aid to help the people in Cuba without facing any sort of US sanctions. It also means that a number of political prisoners are going to be released by the Cuban government. That whole operation is going to be overseen by the Catholic Church. It includes what we're told is a significant number of people, including those who were involved in the so-called food protests in 2021. Now, this is also political, because Joe Biden knows that when the Trump administration comes back to the White House, there are a number of Cuba hardliners there, not least Marco Rubio, a Florida senator who is earmarked to be the next Secretary of State and has spoken out many, many times about the situation in Cuba. So could this be easily flipped? Well, it's not completely easy to do, but certainly Donald Trump could make a number of executive orders in the first couple of days that would effectively nullify what Joe Biden has done. But it's interesting that the Biden campaign and the Biden team criticised Donald Trump doing this on his way out the door. And here Joe Biden has done exactly the same with just 6 days left in the White House.
And just to be clear, this doesn't have any impact on the economic embargo that's been on Cuba since the 1960s, does it?
Well, essentially, if you're designated a state supporter of terrorism, it means that you can't get arms sales. That was never going to happen. It also means that some things designated as dual use could actually make its way through to Cuba without the company providing them getting sanctions. But the biggest plus, of course, is the aid. That means that groups can send aid to Cuba. It can help the people who are living there and make things slightly easier, because we know that certainly Cuba has been struggling over the last few years. Remember, it was back in the 1980s that Cuba was initially designated as a state sponsor of terrorism. That was changed by Barack Obama in 2017, flipped again by Donald Trump, flipped now by Joe Biden. Watch this space about what happens in the next couple of weeks.
You noted there that Biden left it to the last days of his presidency to do this. Many thought that he would do it in the first few days of his presidency. Do we know why there was such a time lag?
Well, they wanted to make sure that all the criteria for changing the designation were met. Now, there's no reason why it's taken 4 years. Certainly, as I said, Antony Blinken in 2022 was looking and saying that they were about to change it. It was possibly going to happen. Why the whole process is taking quite so long, no one is entirely sure. But given that just a week ago, Joe Biden changed the designation of the ability of oil companies to drill offshore in America, this is yet another attempt by Joe Biden, as often happens when presidents are handing over to a president of another party, essentially trying to tie him to some of the policies that are already in place and making things difficult if he wants to change things.
Alan Fisher joining us there from Washington, D.C. Many thanks, Alan.